All right. We'll go ahead and get started. So, welcome to our Watershed stakeholder meeting for the month of May, which is focused on climate change. So, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. We have a very quick little icebreaker question. So, if you want to go ahead and type your response in the chat box in Zoom, please feel free to do that. So, we're asking, what's your favorite climate smart habit that you've already incorporated into your day-to-day routine or something that you want to try? So Katie and I tried to brainstorm some examples like composting, thrifting, fixing your clothes instead of buying new ones. And then if you have any other ideas or suggestions, we'll be glad to hear them. And you can also feel free to introduce yourself and say a little bit about why you're joining tonight if you want as well. And Katie, I might ask you to read out some highlights from the chat because I'm only seeing my screen if there's any good ones you want to share.
Sure, someone mentioned buying an electric lawnmower to replace a gas one.
There you go.
Teleworking, my favorite form of climate-friendly habits. Avoiding plastic is in there.
Good. So we've got an informed bunch.
Mindfulness,
We've got some habits that we're already incorporating. Very good.
conserving water, turning lights out, recycling everything as much as possible.
Nice. Well, these are good suggestions. You can go ahead and, if you think of anything else, feel free to add more to the chat or start scouring the chat for ideas, and then you can add them to your journal for later. I'll go ahead and do a quick overview of our agenda for tonight, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So we just had a little bit of an opening. We have a couple of poll questions that we will give to you in just a moment. And then we're going to move right into our keynote speaker's presentation. We'll be hearing from Dr. Tim Forsman, and then we'll be hearing from Hukuma from the city of Gaithersburg. She's the sustainability coordinator for their sustainability and climate initiatives. Lastly, I'll speak for a couple of minutes about climate change considerations for watershed planning, since that's the big project that we are working on with the city right now. And then we'll have a couple of minutes at the end for some questions and closing thoughts and some next steps about things coming up. So that's our overview. Let's go ahead and launch our poll questions. So first question is, did you attend any of our previous watershed planning meetings, or is this your first time joining us? And then the second question, if you scroll a little bit down, is how are you most interested in contributing to the city's watershed planning project? And there are some options there like helping out with the volunteer stream assessments, hosting community events, sending us locations of problem sites, and providing inputs on potential solutions to problem areas that we identify. But if you think of anything else, again, that chat box is open. So I see some responses coming in. I don't know if they're live sharing. I think we'll share them at the end. So we have lots of repeat attendees, but a couple of new folks as well. Lots of interest in community events and volunteer stream assessments, which is great because we have some next steps coming up on that very soon. We'll give everyone just another moment or so to answer those questions if you still want to. And then we can go ahead and close and end that poll and share the results, Katie. All right. So hopefully you all are seeing that we've got some repeat attendees, but a good chunk of new folks as well, and some good distribution of interests on how folks want to engage in this watershed planning project and all of the city's climate and sustainability initiatives. So we can go ahead and stop sharing those results and keep going. So, with that, I am going to straight away turn it over to Dr. Tim Forstman to introduce himself and tell us all about climate change and trends and challenges. So, let me switch my screen share one moment and I'll get that pulled up. Tim, do you want to introduce yourself while I'm pulling that up?
Um, I will as it comes, as it comes. My
Good
gra
deal.
my graphic support. So when you and I'm not complaining because you you're doing magic here for sure. Just whenever you get the screen up, let me know. There you okay. All right. So hopefully this will work. My name's
And
Tim Forsman. I'm happy to come here and talk about, well, I changed the title a bit, but it's all the same talk. Climate change and watersheds. Now, if things work, and they didn't, we we we're trying. One second, folks. I'm pushing the buttons. We
do you have,
ta-da. Not yet. You may have to push it because it's not working for me now, even though we
or
tested it, folks.
or you can use your mouse and click these arrows.
I can. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, then step away. Ah, there we go. Excellent. So now we think we have control and we will brush along here. Hi, my name's Tim Forsman, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really impressed by what Gaithersburg's doing, what you all are doing out in Montgomery County. It's the kind of spirit of the civil servants and the community that makes a difference. So it's meaningful to me. To highlight of my background, I worked in the United Nations. I worked at NASA. I've worked using satellites and computers to basically map, monitor, model, and measure the ecological conditions around us so that we could make better decisions. Because if we don't see what's going on, we won't know sometimes. And you'll see what I'm talking about shortly. So, oh, and importantly, I live in the Patapsco Valley State Park. I'm a steward, and I live near UMBC where I was a professor. And while I was at UMBC, I got to control these machines here. I was the foundation, a foundation member and the host university for the National Science Foundation's Baltimore Ecosystem Study. So I am one of the, well, yeah, one of the originators of that and the host. And that came about because I'd been mapping Baltimore and Washington and looking at the changes, which I'll show you in a second. But it's nice to know that ecosystems are being studied and funded because there's a lot to know about. And so the Baltimore Ecosystem Studies right in your backyard is a wonderful resource for knowing about the science and how the community responds to the process because it's been a community involved system. And I'm looking for my buttons again. Oh, come on, come on. Let me see. Oh, it worked. Is the idea of a watershed is that it's a convenient way for us to talk about areas, regions, and things that are happening. And they work at multiple scales. So any area that you define as a drainage system, and they can be cascading inside each other, then these work out from an ecological perspective. They make sense, but they also communicate very well with the citizens. So it's not one of those esoteric scientific things that you might not understand. So this is what we're working with. Okay, I'm going to keep trying the buttons. Yay! And the Baltimore Ecosystem Study dealt with a watershed, the Gwynns Falls watershed, which is nested within the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So you see how each one of these can relate to each other, and much like the Matryoshka dolls in Russia, they sit inside each other till you get down to that last little doll, which could be your backyard. Now, the BES, Baltimore Ecosystem Study, was established in 1997, and it is over 20 years now collecting data about what we call what the flux. what goes into that system and what comes out of that system. So we used to laugh about measuring how much nitrogen, how much phosphorus, the pollution, the people, all the things that come into a water system, because that's how we study them. So it's a tremendous resource for you and a lot of things to learn about from the BES. And we're just lucky to have had it in your backyard. And so I worked with that and got it started so that we could study all these different aspects of what's in a watershed. Well, there's the changes, there's the social issues, all that stuff. So that's just a spaghetti word thing out of one of the reports that you realize that a watershed's not just simple how much water is flowing through, but it's all the social, ecological, and economic interrelationships within that. And that's what was so important about the BES, the Baltimore Ecosystem Study. It was the first ecological study to include human beings, the first. So it's nice to do that because, after all, they're one of our favorite species, right? Of course they are. Now, we talk about a water system. Well, you need water. And the Earth happens to be our water planet. Now, you can win in Jeopardy if you remember that Jupiter's Europa and Saturn's Titan actually have more water than our water planet. They have more water. But we have better beaches, and that's what makes Earth so famous because of our beaches. But the truth is the water is a way of measuring, thinking about all of it, and we're a water planet, so watersheds, thematically, it all fits together. Thank goodness, because I couldn't remember it otherwise. Now, the three driving forces of nature that impact watersheds are these: people, land use slash land cover, I lumped that together, and climate change. All right, so we're going to run through those three. Those are the only three you got to remember for the quiz at the end. All right, first off was people. Now, some people think there's not enough people. Some people think there's too many people. Well, there's some challenges out there, and our fisheries are collapsing because too many people are factory farming fish. Biodiversity losses are at least 25% and maybe more this century, again, because of the people pushing them out. So here's where I say maybe we got too many people. Now, there's only 8 billion of us. You would think that's not too many. Well, okay, it's not too many if the slides move. Okay, come on, slide. My slides don't want to move now. So, there it goes, hidden out there. So, it's what happens when you have too many people. Well, we remember in high school with the mice or the rats. Well, guess what? Those laws of biology and physics haven't changed. So, if you put too many rats in the cage, it's bad. I will tell you that. And we knew that over 50 years ago. And the Club of Rome, if you haven't read that book, you should. It was considered radical, alarmist. And the truth is that when they projected populations reaching 5 billion, they underestimated. So even the alarmists weren't able to predict how fast we were growing. So it turns out population could be an issue, but this isn't a talk just about population. It's just showing you the driving forces that are impacting our watersheds. And the combination of these driving forces are causing what a friend of mine, Fiona, said was earth squeeze. She said, we're going to be squozen. We're going to top out between 7 and 10. We're going to get squished together. A lot of bad things are going to happen. And then there'll be the new world later on. So that's in the 21st century is when things start getting bad. So we're going to experience that, and I hope you've got your mind set on that, but not in a negative way, and I'll talk about that as well. But this is the reality. We're going to go through a ringer, my friends, definitely. And there. Now, how that will impact us, different people will have impacts differently. Now, if you travel the world a lot, and we're in my former position in the UN, you will realize that people are living and smiling and fishing and recreating in ways that you might not think are sensible, but in ways that they are doing it. So if you went to the beach on Memorial Day, you'll realize people go to the beaches all over the world. But because there's too many people and the watersheds aren't managed very well, you can see that their holidays aren't as nice as yours was, I hope. And then there's the impact on the biodiversity. And there's things like fisheries that can be impacted. I personally like sushi, but I will avoid it in certain places, obviously. And you say, hey, who am I to judge? Do these kids look happy? They are happy. They're full of joy. So who am I to be the judge on this? But we're saying things can be different in this earth squeeze phenomenon. And yet kids will still go out there, they'll recreate, they'll see the world. And remember, these aren't fake pictures. These are real things that are happening as you and I are speaking now. Now, I would say that the current Secretary RFK Jr. doesn't seem to think there's a big problem with swimming in polluted lakes, if you've kept up with the news. But he does say we'd be crazy to take medical advice from him. So do remember that. He keeps saying that. No one should take medical advice from him. We should listen to him, is what I say. Anyway, so things can be bad, things can seem bad, but you don't dwell on the bad. That's not good for us. So that's people, right? It's happening. No more lecture, no more discussion on people. Now we're going to talk about land use and land cover. This is a lot more fun, a lot more fun. So first we look at our system that we're in. And we all learned this in high school. Some of you are even went to college, I understand. And so those high school and college graduates, you will all remember that this complex system, the earth, volcanoes, rains, it's all how we work together. And it's a very wonderful system that I've spent a lifetime studying. We're going to only focus, though, on this part of it, which is the water cycle. So the water evaporates into the atmosphere, into the troposphere. It comes down as rain, snow. It lands on the mountains and gives us snow and ice, and that slowly melts and gives us what we call the snow melt. And that's one of the challenges of these days is that the glaciers are melting and they're melting and not restoring the water. So this is part of the water cycle and it's becoming unbalanced in certain areas. But this is the basic issue. The water goes up and it comes down, right? Boom, hydrologic cycle. But let's look at it a little more and see upon the landscape that this happens. The landscape that this happens, one more slide. The water goes up, and you see that cloud over Mount Fuji. I took this picture a year ago when I was up there, and I caught the picture. I thought, wow, that's very interestingly. It looks like an Asian farmer's hat, kind of a peasant hat on top of Mount Fuji. Well, they sampled that cloud, and they sampled that cloud and found microplastics. Then they were able to track the microplastics to the Pacific Ocean. So we have empirical evidence that the microplastics that we keep hearing about are going up into the cloud and coming down. Again, a part of the hydrologic cycle. Now, unfortunately, those microplastics are getting into people, and they're finding out that all males seem to carry them, and that the global male fertility seems to be dropping, and that the microplastics turn into some interesting endocrine disrupting chemicals that are in our system. So we're sitting in soup and it's cycling around us, and sometimes that can be a little stressful, but hey, we're trying to do good. Now, the landscape that all this water is coming down with its microplastics, I'm going to show you what Maryland was like for the last 200 years. So you see, 200 years ago, all right, and from 1792 up to 1992, this is the work that I pioneered out of UMBC that led to Glenn Denning's Smart Growth Project and legislation. So, well, we'll give you a couple pictures of this. This is just the overview so that you can see it. But now if we look at just four shots, a little higher resolution, We can see in 1792 when George Washington was commander in chief, uh, you don't see much red there in Washington D.C. It was a little village. In fact, that's why he lived down in Mount Vernon, just down the river. But then we see about 100 years later, the little village of Baltimore is the lower red one, and the upper, I'm sorry, that's DC, is the lower red one, and the upper one from there is Baltimore. So in 1900, not too big. Now we go half a century later, after World War II, 1953, you see those towns have grown quite a bit. And then we go, what? Less than 50 years later, whoosh. So Glendenning, Governor Paris Glendenning described this because we made it into a video loop that he showed all around. He said this was the amoeba that ate Maryland. And so he's not so wrong. Here we are again, 1792. Now, now I admit these are people growing, but so I wasn't going to talk about people, but it's the land use, it's the urban sprawl. So 1900, you can see Washington D.C.'s grown some. There's a lot of open space between Baltimore and Washington D.C. And now we see 1953 and 1992. So you see how the landscape of the trees and the meadows have been changed into an urban landscape. And that looks a bit like some kind of yellow fungus that's eating Baltimore. And that's what we have today. So instead of the beautiful forest and instead of the meadows and all the water catchment system that nature provided, we have impermeable surfaces, rooftops, roads, shopping malls, etc. And that changes the watershed dynamics. So, smart growth was created by Glendenning using those images I showed you to convince the legislation to be passed. So, it looks very different today than when John Smith, and John Smith was right behind my house, 1,000 yards is where there's a monument behind my house where he came in 1804, 1608, sorry, in 1608. And he drew the first maps. So, what has changed? Well, maybe we will talk about a little bit of population. So, urban sprawl is the thing. And we often talk about the carcinoma of urban sprawl because it happens so fast. People go, well, how do we control it? How do we manage it? And that has been the question in planners and county offices and city offices for a long time. So each day in Maryland, we're stripping away the green stuff and planting more houses. And that's the battle. That's the environment that we're in now that you need to participate with your city planners and participate in these things to discuss, hey, what can we do? Because we know that the rural legacy of the farms and the agriculture and the natural farms, they are what protect the watersheds the most. And yet we're clearing them out for all kinds of things. And so that's why it's important to pay attention, because this is what we've got to intercept the rain. So when the rain comes, this is where it lands. And we go, that doesn't quite look like the forests and the meadows that we used to have. I wonder if there's a difference in the way water comes and lands on these. Well, I'm going to tell you that there's a big difference, and that the natural environment soaks up that water and handles it as it has for thousands and thousands of years, long before our species even came on this planet, compared to the urban environment. How much? Well, probably 55% runoff in an urban area versus 10% runoff in the natural areas. So that's a big difference. And that difference we see when we get 100-year floods in places like Ellicott City. We go, oh, that's why there's so much water. And yes, indeed, that is true. So the floods and the urbanization, even though it's the same amount of water as in shown in the top more natural landscape, the bottom urban landscape, in that little curve of discharge over time, it's the same amount of water, but it's distributed slowly or more slowly in a more regulated way, nature regulated way, versus the urban discharge, which comes pounding out of the stormwater or down Main Street in Ellicott City if it has no place to go. Now, once again, we look at four different perspectives here. If we the most natural that we could get, we end up with 10% runoff from the same rainstorm. Then we go with a house or two, 20% runoff. We put a few houses, we think it's nice and nice setting. We still have 30% runoff. And if you have a city like Damascus or Gaithersburg, you're up to 55%. So in the city. So that's just the reality. And it's the reality that the engineers and the planners have to work with. So one of the principles is how wide a buffer can we create to maintain nature's benefits? The farther away we are from the streams, etc., the more buffer we have, the more trees and grasses to intercept the water, to soak it back into the ground, then the better off we are. So it's kind of a distant issue. How far away are these things? Now, one of the reasons that we're constrained in our ability to do things is because it costs money. Taxes. Your taxes cost you money. So your taxes are constantly applied for erosion control, etc. It's just the price of admission for urban, and we need to do smarter things to save money, and we can. There's a lot of drive around. I'm more familiar with Ellicott City because I live over here in Elkridge, and these are behind the buildings, etc. We see all these kinds of riprap and things to hold the stream and to control it, and it's partially works. It partially works, but much better systems exist that also aesthetically we say, whoa, we should be creating these kinds of backyards. We should be doing these kinds of buffers, which are natural and will intercept the water in a much more pleasant way. So each community should have a beautiful backyard and a drainage system, rain gardens that make sense, and permeable driveways, permeable everywhere we can go to make them nicer. Because obviously we would like communities like that. But also, obviously, it costs serious money in the landscaping design to do that. So to get ahead of it saves money. To come in later costs more money, but the damage from the floods is also big time. So this is the kind of thing we want to see. After all, it's a heck of a lot more pleasant, and a pleasant environment is good for all of our spiritual and health. Because what's not good for us is the 100-year floods, which happen almost every other year these days. And so here's what Ellicott City, one of my favorite little social places that we used to go to, it got washed out again because of this lack of control. And here's the bridge down there by the railroad museum, and that's the first rail station in the country. So it's a good place to visit. It's still there. I went and checked it. It didn't get too damaged, but that was a horrific thing, and we do want to prevent that in the future. And that's why you want to pay attention to your watershed specialists because we need their help. And one of the things that we learned from the flood was that if we look at the urbanization, the sprawl, the surface areas that went from green and went into housing and lack of green, there was just no place for the water to soak up. So when you have a 100-year flood, you're going to have it in the worst place possible. And it's going to take people, communities that care and are out there cleaning up the streams to make sure that they're functioning the way they're supposed to, not just for the hydrologic water runoff, but for the biodiversity, for the fish, for the birds, for the animals. So it makes quality of life for everybody better if we pay attention. So join various organizations and spend some time cleaning up streams and participating. It's a good thing to do. Now, the last of our three driving forces is climate change. Now, if you don't know who Charles David Keeling is, you need to write it down because a lot of people say, well, how do you know climate change is happening? How do you know that there's more CO2 in the air? We know because scientists, specifically Charles David Keeling, started measuring it in 1958. And he went up to the top of Mount Mauna Leo Observatory in Hawaii, the Big Island, because it was the most pristine air in the troposphere to sample for the planet. So he went up there and started sampling every day. And guess what he found out? That's the curve, and it's increasing every year, every year, every year. And so when people say, well, how do you know? Climate changes all the time. We have weather change. Say, no, 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 no. If your child was taking a temperature and the curve was going like this, you'd be in the emergency room. If any other condition you can think of, if this was the curve, you would be hair on fire paying attention. We've slowly come to the realization that this really is happening, and we get to thank David Keeling for that. The World Meteorologic Organization, in their last year's report, confirmed that we're number one. Yes, we got the highest, warmest temperature ever. But don't worry, we'll beat it this year, so we're still in the race. But 1.55 degrees centigrade. And some of you might be saying, well, wait a minute, didn't we have a meeting in Paris and we said we're going to stop it at 1.5? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll leave that unstated. So here we are, 431. We're doing good. When when my friend Bill McGibbon came up with his 350 organization, I said, Bill, you're crazy. We're going to go by that so fast that 350 is going to seem silly. And he did. So humans have been here for a little while, been here longer than that chart. They've been here for 300,000 years. But look where we are and climbing. So we're doing amazing things in our lifetime. Amazing. Uh-oh. Okay, what happened? Okay, let's see. Push, 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 push. So, here's the facts. The Earth is warming. Somebody wants to argue with that. Send them my way. Send them anyway. There's no reason to argue with them. If you wrestle with a pig, you get muddy and the pig has a good time. So don't argue with somebody over is the Earth warming. And now we know why. And that's the thing. We know why, and we should be doing something about it. So, from the species perspective, we're in the middle of the sixth mass species extinction. The last one was 66 million years ago, and we lost the dinosaurs. I'm okay with losing the dinosaurs. I don't think I'd want to go to a national park and run into a dinosaur, but that's okay. But this time it's not okay, and it's from resource extraction, CO2 emissions, and dare I say, overpopulation. So, but don't let that capture your brain. Be aware of the facts, but positive attitudes are really the key, the elixir to making it change. Why do we know this? Because we have a bunch of pointy headed scientists doing MRIs of people's brains. And a guy named Vincent Peale, Norman Vincent Peale, wrote a book called The Power of Positive Thinking. We know it works. We know it works. We know it works. So, when in doubt, write somewhere power of positive thinking on your mirror when you're having a bad day. We know it works. And if you, unless you want to suffer, and I'm not one of those people, I want to have fun and get together with my communities. And so, positive thinking. Here's a little more on climate change to update. If you're not familiar with the Omega Block, I'm thinking it should be a movie, the Omega Block. But what the Omega Block is besides being the last letter of the Greek alphabet, which you all knew, of course, but it's the shape of the meteorologic conditions from a wobbling jet stream. And the jet stream is wobbling because of why? Well, it's wobbling and it's moving southwards up and down. And we know this because of the climate change. We've been monitoring this. We've been monitoring it, but it's wild and it's a crazy ride, and we're in it. we're in this crazy ride. We're not getting out of it. We're not getting out of it soon. So this is going to make weird weather more common. No question about it. So what the omega thing is, it gets that shape of omega by the jet stream pinching off two low pressure areas with a high pressure area in between. So when you hear them talk about the omega area, like Hurricane Sandy got pinned and shoved in and caused a lot of rain because it holds it there for a while. And a lot of rain puts a lot of pressure on our watersheds. Ta-da. Okay, we're here. We're playing with this thing again. Come on, come on, come on. Okay. Climate change, right? So increasing north and south, again, all monitored by satellites, data, etc. So we're very, very accurate. We're very accurate in terms of on the planet on this. This is no longer a guessing game or anybody's opinion. So just this May, and it's still May. This is a picture of where warmer temperatures on the left, where in the lower atmosphere we have higher than average. And of course, you see things like Greenland and Iceland, and I spend a lot of time in Iceland, and that's causing things to melt faster. So these conditions are causing us, with the same time period, look at our rain forecast, our the record of the rain in Tennessee and Kentucky, and that leads up to us. We do live in the eastern deciduous rainforest. That's the name of our the forest. That's the name of our ecological region. So it's used to having rain, but this much rain is a little odd. And so we're having more rain than we probably expected, and we're going to have that because we're back here at this radical crazy number and it's increasing, and that's impacting the jet stream, which is forcing everything to move back and forth. So this is the new normal. That's basically what I'm trying to express. So we can be alarmed and we can be upset, or we can go, no, this is the new normal. So precipitation is going to increase, and you can see right up our alley, right up our eastern deciduous rainforest, we're going to get a lot more rain. Expect it, with intermittent periods of a lot less rain. So the variability will increase. And you'll see articles much like out of the Guardian. Just, I think I took this one out today, saying that good old time playing banjos, drinking moonshine in the Appalachians going to get a little rougher because there's going to have a lot of rain. And you saw what happened to Asheville. It was a real sad, sad story. So we probably should pay attention. Probably. We probably should care. Now, what I would recommend when people say, what can I do? Well, considering the rainfall, I would say make sure the shutters on your house aren't just pretty features. Make sure they work. All my shutters work because I'm in the forest and I don't want trees going through my living room. And I have done rain gardens. I have controlled drainage. I work through all of that to make sure cascading hillsides. So these are the things people can do, and go to the Gaithersburg and participate to learn more from the experts like Katie Evers and others to talk about what else they can do. But immediately, the first two things you can do is save damage to your house by functional shutters. And yes, they're not free. You've got to pay for them and install them, but they're a lot cheaper than what's going to happen if you don't. And the rain gardens, you can make beautiful rain gardens, impress your guests, have cocktail parties, show people what you're doing, and they're going to like it. They're going to like it. So, are we just going to hope for a better future? Well, some people can do that. That's why we have alcohol and drugs as well. But what we can do is we can say, this is the new normal. And 99% of the people are the problem. 99% of the people are not doing their best. And all you've got to do is talk to 10 people. 10 people. They might have been your friends before you talk to them, but after you scare the heck out of them with their new reality, maybe they'll come aboard and say, you know, you're right. And we don't have to be negative about it. This could be good. This is why we get together on the second Saturday up in Damascus every month to talk about these things, to share with the community things we've learned. So we only need to move a few people because we know that the contraction's happening. We know Earth squeeze because of all of our other activities, and we want to focus on how can we do stewardship, how can we collaborate, and how can we work together to help each other because that is the only antidote because you're going to wait a long time if you wait for the government to pull up to your front porch and save you. You've got to be proactive, you've got to be smart, work with your community and plan ahead. Because if you do that, you can show them your vision when they're planning, when they're talking about this development, when they're looking at new shopping malls. Talk about your vision, participate with them, and say, look, I want a beautiful future. I want cities that are green, vibrant, that are enhancing the human spirit, not degrading it. And guess what? We know we can do it. We have examples everywhere, but we're not focused all the time. We're lost in our smartphones, we're lost on dumb television. Participate in community if you want to make a difference, because our Earth is a small, fragile spaceship in this void called space. And Buckminster Fuller told us about that and said, think about it as a spaceship, spaceship Earth. We have to protect it. Everything we need's on it, and everything that we pollute goes right back into it. So let's pay attention. Let's use science and data and visualization to help other people understand the magnitude and why we're concerned. And if we do that, we will bring along a lot more converts. So anybody can get, I'll send, well, you've got my images. You can get this whole presentation from the Gaithersburg team. If any of those images help you communicate to other people what the issue is, then great. You have my blessing to go out there and do that. So the choice is yours. How are you going to take this information? I say be positive, work with your communities, gather together, work with your city and county and your neighbors, and do the best you can. And I thank you very much for the time you shared with me, allowing me to share this brief talk. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tim. That was a great overview. I really appreciate it. Um, I do just want to share one thing real quick. One bit of maybe a positive spin that's really helped me recently is back in just April of this year, there was a global electricity, like energy review report released. And for the first time ever, the global renewable energy production completely surpassed the US's carbon emissions, which is not enough. We still have to do more, but solar panels are the TV of renewable energy, and there is some brightness in our future in terms of energy production and carbon mitigation. Um, but yeah, that was a really comprehensive, great overview, Tim. Thanks so much. All right, well, let me go ahead and turn it right over to Hakuma to talk about some of the local stuff that the city of Gaithersburg is doing in terms of climate planning and sustainability initiatives. And then if you have any questions for Tim in the chat, please go ahead and post those in the chat and we will have some time for questions at the end. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Hakuma. And I believe I need to pull up that screen share as well. Give me just one moment.
In the meantime, I just wanted to say hi. I'm Akuma Karimova. I'm the Sustainability Administrator for the City of Gaithersburg. And Tim, thank you so much for the insightful presentation and for sharing the science behind climate change. Emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, keeping CO2 as low as possible is the key because it creates a greenhouse effect where everything gets warmer. And so, although globally things are increasing and getting maybe slightly worse, we do have positive news to share, especially on the local level here in the city of Gaithersburg. And as Jordan is bringing up the presentation, I'm going to share what those good news are. Do I have to accept anything?
Yeah, hopefully you should have gotten the go ahead and now you have control to switch the slides if you want, or you can just say next slide and I can do it, whatever you prefer.
Okay, perfect. I think, yes. Okay. Oh, am I still moving them?
I'm not doing anything.
Okay, I guess they're moving faster than I expected. Um, but we're good now. So the good news is that the city of Gaithersburg is part of a regional organization called the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, MWCOG. And we have aligned with a goal of reducing our carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions by 50% when compared to the 2005 baseline by 2030 and 80% by 2050. And when reviewing our community carbon footprint, which is calculated by MWCOG, we can see that we've already achieved a 33% reduction in 2020. And that means that to reach our goal for 2030, we need additional 17% reduction. And to reach our 2050 goal, we need to aim for a 47% reduction. MWCOG is currently putting together the community carbon emissions calculations for 2023. And when that information is available, we'll be doing additional forecasting and emissions targeting to see if we're still aligned with those goals and if we can make our goals more ambitious. If we take a granular look at the Jordan, would you actually mind hitting next? Because for some reason it
I
moves 10
don't I don't
slides
know why
ahead.
it's doing that. I'm not clicking anything. That's weird. Let me pull that back up for you.
Thank you.
Is that showing up all right? What
Yeah.
is going on? Why is it like animated? What?
Yes, I have no idea. It moves maybe 20 slides ahead. Okay, perfect. So if we take a closer look at what the emissions are composed of, it's no surprise that buildings and transportation make up a big portion of it. So 40% is from buildings, and these are commercial and residential, and 44% is from transportation. Continuing with the good news is that both Maryland, the state of Maryland, and the county have put together building energy performance standards, which encourage buildings that are 35,000 square feet and larger on the state of Maryland level, and on the county level, any buildings that are 25,000 square foot and larger to meet energy emission standards. And then for the state of Maryland, their goal is to reach net zero direct greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. For the county level, it's slightly different. Each building, depending on the category, will have 10 years to reduce their emissions by targets that will be determined. And within the city of Gaithersburg, we have 4 municipal buildings that need to meet these requirements. So we're actively working on reducing our emissions, and we're actively working on creating more alternative transportation, such as enhancing and improving our bicycle lanes, making the city more walkable. In the next slide, we will see what are some of the strategic initiatives that are helping drive these programs forward. One of them is on the city level, is the strategic plan, which was launched in 2022. And this past September, we hit a midway point. It's a strategic plan for 5 years with goals to be completed by 2027. And they span different categories, such as creating safe and welcoming communities, ensuring economic development and growth, environmental stewardship, again, viable transportation. And within environmental stewardship, there is a goal to maintain and continue getting the highest level of Sustainable Maryland certification, which we will cover in the next slide. So, Sustainable Maryland is a program from the University of Maryland, and we've been a member since 2011, and it's all voluntary. So, the city of Gaithersburg has been voluntarily doing this since 2011, and the focus is on creating, achieving certain actions that are again outlined through different groupings, and categorizations, such as community action, which looks at community art projects, having HOA green teams. There's community-based food systems, which focuses on farmers markets, CSA drop-off sites, energy, which promotes renewable energy, ensuring that the municipal vehicle fleet moves towards electric, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, health and wellness, and so on. So since we've joined, the city of Gaithersburg has reached its highest level, which is the silver certification level. And we are actually in the process of putting together our recertification, which happens every 3 years. And this one is due by June 30th. So we have several green teams that help support the work, including our interdepartmental green team within the city, made up of different departments, which is key for providing a very holistic approach and insight into how we can reach those goals, because it's not the work of just one department or one team. And so part of the Sustainable Maryland greenhouse gas category is creating a climate action plan. And in the next slide, I will go deeper into explaining what is a climate action plan. So it's a tool that helps prioritize, list, and understand what are the priority actions and targets that the city will aim for to meet in order to help reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, as well as advance our sustainability goals. Because after all, every city, every team is limited by the human capacity, the resources that they have, including time. So prioritization and focusing on the intersectional actions, which will provide positive impact across different target areas, is the focus. Montgomery County has an action plan, so does Rockville, and we're learning from their experiences. For instance, Montgomery County has 86 actions, which they have come to see is maybe too ambitious and difficult to accomplish, especially if the actions don't have specific targets and key performance indicators to measure the progress by. So we're going to be very mindful when creating ours. And in the next slide, you will see that the climate action plan is composed of 3 pillars. There's the planet, the people, and the policy. When looking at the planet, it focuses on natural resources such as the water quality. It looks at waste generation, the energy that is being used to power the city. Under the people pillar, it focuses on health and wellness. As Tim was saying, staying positive, engaging with other community members, creating a sense of belonging is important in advancing some of these sustainability goals. So we look at creating green spaces. We've recently just opened up community gardens in the Pleasant View Park. Under policy pillar, it looks at what are the codes and regulations that can help promote the sustainable behavior and also create accountability and transparency, such as when development projects happen, our team looks at what is the impact on trees, on the forests, on the watersheds, the streams. So we're actively reviewing those plans. And yes, we can skip this and head into the existing timelines. So as mentioned, we have short, medium, and long-term goals. On the In the short term, we are currently waiting for MWCOG to produce our 2023 community carbon footprint. And we're also simultaneously working with Sustainable Maryland to put together our municipal carbon footprint. And by understanding what percentage of the community carbon footprint are municipal services and programs and processes make up, we can have a better understanding on what we can do to reduce that impact. Because after all, we can only really directly control the emissions created by the city, while also encouraging our stakeholders like residents, HOAs, businesses to do their part. So that's in the short term. And in the medium term, we are actively working on putting together our climate action plan RFP, where we'll bring in a consultant to help us do materiality assessment to help prioritize those goals. We'll engage the public to get inputs from residents, nonprofits to understand what are their priorities, what are they being impacted by. And we're hopeful that the RFP will be live and we'll have a contractor by fall of 2025. And then for the long term, again, it's all about interconnectedness, collaboration, cooperation. So we have green teams across both within the city, interdepartmental green team. We have the EAC, which is our other green team made up of residents. Jeanette is here representing the EAC, and they basically provide insights and help create programs that we have since adopted, such as the Fix It Fair, which Alan and Tim are well aware of because they have volunteer fixers that help residents bring lamps, small appliances, other items that might not be working, and instead of throwing them away, they get fixed. We also have the HOA teams that help with BMPs, which focus on improving the stormwater management. As Tim was saying, when we have a lot of rain coming down, unless there are rain barrels, all the water basically gets flushed down the street, picking up dirt and oils and going into the Chesapeake Bay. So we have programs to help incentivize and provide rebates for individuals that want to put together rain barrels, as well as we're working with cities, the city green schools. So recently, about 3, 4 weeks ago, we visited the Gaithersburg Middle School and we met with Mr. Edwards, who runs a greenhouse gas course, greenhouse class, where he talks about how to grow your food, how to garden. And so we're trying to engage with as many different individuals, groups as possible and encourage them in this process of reducing our emissions and creating more livable, thrivable community. And in the last slide, I just wanted to summarize that this is something that we're actively working on. And we're also taking a very holistic approach by engaging groups across residents, academia, government, as well as ensuring that equity is at the heart of the planning, because again, it's the most vulnerable groups that don't really have access to resources that will be impacted by this the most. And Gaithersburg is one of the most diverse cities in America. It also has a lot of low and mid-income neighborhoods. So, for instance, recently we applied for a grant to plant trees, and those trees will be, if we receive it, but even if we don't, the trees will be planted across parks, which are in low and mid-income neighborhoods. So, equity and holistic approach is at the heart of what we do. And should you have any questions, please let us know. We can answer them offline through the chat. And I also want to open the floor. I know, Nancy, you mentioned something in the chat. Would you like to add any additional points?
Where am I? Sorry, my computer is adjusting. No, I just mentioned that we did have a federal grant, so we're a little behind on our planned schedule for creating the climate action plan because that was dropped. But we are still moving forward. So that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kuma. Lots of good resources that folks can explore after the call, and a good overview of all the many things that the city is up to kind of stay ahead of the curve with future conditions and what we're expecting. All right, let me share my screen one more time. Are you all seeing that all right? Yeah. Okay, good. So I'm just going to close with a couple of kind of summary thoughts about climate change considerations for watershed planning and how we specifically considering climate change like impacts as part of this watershed planning project specifically. So as we know from our previous presentations, climate impacts our watersheds big time in terms of high precipitation, so flashy precipitation, rain that comes in more severe amounts and faster time frames. So those rain events may be spaced farther apart in between periods of drought, which makes things even more tricky in terms of infiltrating lots of rain and things like that. We're also expecting higher temperatures, both in terms of the air and our water bodies. And then sea level rise, of course, which is coupled with land subsidence in some areas, as the eastern shore of Maryland is sinking in addition to sea level rising. So lots of impacts on our watersheds. I do just want to offer you a moment to think about how these climate change indicators specifically affect our waterways. So Tim showed some great photos earlier of some of these conditions, like what they result in, erosion and trash on beaches and things like that. What does climate change look like in terms of its effects on our waterways and the ways that we actively manage the land and water in our jurisdictions? So I'm just including this so that you can read it later. I am not going to go through this in any severe amount of detail, but CWP actually did a kind of large scale national research project to evaluate post-construction stormwater standards and how resilient each state in America is against climate change projections. So there's lots of specific climate impacts that we know of on stormwater management, but the kind of long and short of it is that when we have more flashy rain, we get more flooding, which means more erosion, which means more pollution. So wide-ranging water quantity and quality impacts. We know that ecosystem and food chain changes will occur when our native plant and animal species can't survive our new or extreme weather conditions. And we also know that these flashier, more frequent and severe rain events can inundate our gray infrastructure network, our pipe network, and cause flooding and infrastructure damage to like culverts under roads, the roadways themselves, bridges, etc. I did want to share this article, which I really like. It's a good synthesis from a couple years ago about how stormwater management systems can be designed for resiliency and some future climate stuff that we know is going to happen. So this is that National Watershed Research Network project that I mentioned earlier. Here you can see a little bit of a matrix of how vulnerable each of our states are to climate change impacts and how ready they are in terms of their regulatory protections and policy stuff, some of those details that Hukuma was mentioning. So the long and short, a lot of us are not ready for expected impacts. So there's a lot of work for us to do as communities and advocacy organizations and activists. You'll see that Maryland is a highly vulnerable state, but its preparedness level is only at moderate, which is interesting because Maryland is considered largely a stormwater management and climate change leader in the country. So still lots of work to do. So what does that mean? What tools do we actually use? What do we actually do to become more prepared? So this is kind of what we're doing in our project to address these things. First, we're doing this large-scale codes and ordinances kind of watershed protection capacity audit, if you will, to review all of our regulatory guidance and specifications to offer improvements for engineers who design projects that protect water resources. So some of that regulatory angle. And again, reviewing the codes and ordinances that apply to buildings and development standards. Again, like what Hakuma was mentioning, some of those building standards and mitigation for additional impervious cover that's installed as part of new developments. So we will evaluate and identify improvements for those things. We're also we're identifying, assessing in the field, and providing information to help with implementation for a bunch of different physical on-the-ground projects in the city that will improve resilience. So that's things like landscape scale restoration projects to reconnect waterways to their floodplain or things like that to add some more infiltration and let that urban impervious runoff kind of infiltrate a little bit more before it gets carried farther downstream. And also site scale retrofit projects where we go back and add a rain garden to a site that's already been developed to capture additional runoff and things like that. Like Tim mentioned, a big goal of watershed planning and a way that it activates climate change and resilience against climate change is to build connection and understanding between the community, advocacy and volunteer groups, and various local government and regulatory staff. So that's the city's environmental services division, as well as county and state regulators. And as part of this project, we have representation and engagement from all of those unique stakeholder groups. So at the end of this project, we're presenting the watershed plans to the mayor and county council and things like that. So I'm a little nervous about that one, but it'll be good for holistic implementation and kind of putting these results in the hands of the folks who make the decisions. And then lastly, these plans will contribute to ongoing efforts, again, largely what Hakuma talked about earlier. So the strategic planning efforts, climate action planning, and capital improvement projects for stormwater repair or infrastructure improvements and expansion, which the city does, I think annually, but someone might have to correct me on that, or maybe it's a living document, the capital improvement project plan. So yeah, there's lots of ways that our watershed planning project that we're working on with the city and with all of you on as part of this meeting. There's lots of ways that those plans are considering climate and helping to offer solutions that the city can kind of take and run with over the next however many years as we're really in crunch time for preparing for additional resiliency needs. So that's a little bit of an overview. I'll keep it short because we got such a great overview already from Tim and Hakuma, but I do want to open it up to any questions. And Katie, maybe you can help me out with kind of pulling some questions from the chat, or Michaela, anybody, if you want to chime in and we can
Yeah.
throw some questions. Yeah.
Well, it looks like our presenters have actually been answering in the chat, so
Oh,
I could
nice.
actually, we have plenty of time if anyone wants to come off of mute and ask a question. We've got a little bit of time for that.
Great.
Yeah, and I can answer that the CIP is kind of an evolving structure or pattern. We
Yeah.
have CIP projects planned for the next couple of years,
Yeah.
but we will also be using this study. We used our Headwaters study to help design and plan for projects in the future, and we'll be using this watershed study as well to kind of put together a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan. And as Michaela said, as for the most part, we coordinate with other communities. We work very closely with Rockville, Tacoma Park on regional plans when we're invited to do that and when they are willing to do that and we invite them. So, I mean, we do collaborate with other communities, but our budget and our things tend to focus on this community. The reason that the Watershed Planning Initiative includes outside communities is because watersheds have no boundaries. So, we really wanted to look at this more holistically and understand our impacts to our downstream neighbors as well. We're also, as Okuma said, part of the Metro Washington Council of Governments, so we collaborate with them on a whole bunch of different issues. And our floodplain map updates were coordinated with the county and with Rockville and Tacoma Park. So, I mean, we really are, I like to think that we're good neighbors, and and so collaboration and cooperation are part of our way of life.
Definitely. I think that the watersheds follow no jurisdictional boundaries message is something that we run into a lot. So I think it's very good to be kind of holistic in this and with the city's approach. I see, Tony, you have your hand raised. Do you want to unmute and ask a question?
Yes, and I think Nancy said the words. I live in Deer Park, which is at the headwaters of the Muddy
Yeah.
Branch headwaters. So I was wondering about the city had the neighbors get together, and I guess it's the headwaters study. Is that the one, Nancy, that I just
Yeah.
wondered
Yes.
what was happening. So this is the watershed study. So all of these studies are going to come together before we see, I was kind of wondering when are they going to start implementing these new pipes and new
Right. So we are
all of
looking,
that.
we've prioritized some of those. So some have been added to our, lists of projects in the future. As you can imagine, in a city where you have, a pretty extensive storm system, you have projects that are reactive, you have projects that you plan for, and we prioritize based on, what's imminent, what we know we need to do in the future. And it's also a kind of a slow process because we do have to go through a fair procurement process where we allow, a certain number of people to bid on our projects. We can't just go, especially if they're over a certain threshold of funding, we can't just go and give them to the people we like. We have to actually have a fair process that allows us to evaluate people's proposals based on funding, based on how much money it's going to cost, for instance, to do a project and their qualifications. So that's a process that takes a little time to complete. And our CIP projects are always publicized. So if you look at the budget for next year, you'll see what projects are funded. We recently hired an on-call, two actually on-call companies that will fix things that we know need to be fixed. So again, we have a list of priority projects that needed to be fixed, and this will allow us having an on-call contractor, which went through a fair labor procurement process. Um, they'll be at the ready to fix projects that are imminent. So it's,
Can
I don't know if that might be confusing, but what were you going to say, Jordan?
Oh, I was just going to add that the headwater study, so the watershed plans are kind of cumulative, if you will. Like
Right.
we're learning from and building on previous efforts. We're not repeating those efforts. So we have the 2024 Mudwaters, excuse me, the Muddy Branch Headwaters study. I'm combining words, it's too late. So we've reviewed that study thoroughly, and we're not assessing the exact same locations because we don't want to be redundant and duplicate those efforts. But those opportunities are going to be included and summarized in our watershed plans so that they're kind of these holistic roadmaps for implementation over the city's next 5, 10 years or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and the watershed plans are guidance documents. So they're some of the tools in our toolbox for solving problems within the community. We also have 7 dams in this community, and 5 of them are considered high hazard, meaning that they were built in the 70s. They reach have a certain threshold for their need. Dams are designed to help ameliorate downstream flooding. So we do emergency response plans every year for those. We have inundation maps, but we do have a couple problems on a couple of those dams in a way because of their age. So those are kind of priority projects for fixing because, again, we don't want to create other problems. Maintenance in any community over time, and especially old infrastructure, is kind of an ongoing, process like us. pipes age and fail, systems age and fail, and so keeping ahead of that and making sure that we're doing our maintenance and maintaining that existing infrastructure is also key. But we have and do have plans for the headwaters study results, definitely.
It's a good looking report. I like that report. It's lots of good
Thanks.
stuff in there.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean,
Definitely. Yeah. It's a really comprehensive look at a important part of the city's watersheds for sure.
yeah.
There's a question from Robert in the chat. Are there new rainfall projections slash standards that take the increased storms into consideration?
So I did not want to get into this. I was trying to spare you all the details, but yeah, this is a great question. There definitely are. Um, each and every stormwater project that's designed by a water resources engineer in, we'll say in the state of Maryland, just to be general, all of those projects are designed for something called a design storm, which is the amount of rainfall that you expect within 24 hours based on like a frequency or a likelihood of that happening, however many years, 100 years, 500 years, whatever. So there's lots of different modeling tools that engineers use to make their sizing assumptions when they're designing and building these types of projects. Um, as part of kind of larger, more landscape scale modeling that we are doing as part of this watershed planning project, we'll be considering future conditions on a larger, like I said, more kind of landscape regional scale using updated climate estimates for rainfall for the area. But some engineers do really cool stuff with site scale local estimates using things like, I think one of them is called Marissa. That's a very common rainfall projection. I don't know, that just has a cute name, so that's the one I remember. Atlas 14, I know, is another common one. So yeah, there's lots of cool science and tools out there. Anyone
Yeah,
else want
and
to add? Yeah, go ahead.
I'll say also that the floodplain maps that are just about to be approved and again in collaboration with Montgomery County, who worked with FEMA to update our flood insurance rate
Mm-hmm.
maps. Um, those take into consideration the what they call the 100-year storm and the 500-year storm, which is also called the 1% and the 2%. 1% meaning that every rainstorm has a potential of 1% to create a certain volume of floods. And so the good news in Gaithersburg is that we've kept out of our floodplains. And that is really important to note that even as time has gone by and these stream systems are increasing in their water volume and their water velocities, we've managed to keep development out of those floodplains. And that is really critical after North Carolina flooded, I'm the floodplain manager in the city, so the first thing I did was look up the flood hazard maps. And that whole area was in a special flood hazard area, which means that the likelihood of it flooding was really significant. And a special flood, it meant that all they needed was 1 foot of rise in that area to flood and wipe out that whole area. And you can imagine in the volume of storm that came through that it was significantly higher than 1 foot. And that means that at the water level, if it goes up 1 foot, it spreads out, of course, that distance that it has to spread out in a stream system. And so, we've been smart about that. And not every community can claim that. And because people own those properties and they live in these areas. So even as water levels have been rising because of stream surges, because of impermeable pavement, this asking people to move out of them, rebuying those properties or reclaiming those properties has been a challenge. And we don't have that problem in Gaithersburg, which is a really good thing.
And I think that's a wonderful point. And the only thing I would add is like, I feel like historical Ellicott City, old Ellicott City, is a perfect example of that, where sometimes that development happens before we really understand that you're not supposed to build in the floodplain. People
Right.
colonize or settle near water. It's like the roads before we had them, you know? So it makes sense why a lot of our cities with some history, especially in the state of Maryland, are around these kind of flood zone areas.
Right.
But a breath of relief, kind of wipe the sweat from your brow that most of the
Right.
city's floodplains are mostly vegetated.
Right.
Good deal. All right, well, let's do a couple closing slides, and then if we have a
Okay.
few minutes at the end, we'll come back for any additional questions if that works for everyone. But get through these real quick. We'll come back to this one too, just thinking about climate change. I want to remind everyone that we have a survey open where you can send us specific problem locations and your overall feedback on these watershed plans. You are welcome to submit to this survey multiple times if you want to share multiple locations or if you think of additional thoughts as we go through more and more of these meetings. So this survey is still open for you to submit to. Additionally, we have a survey open to sign up for volunteer stream assessments. So as we talked, I think at our previous meeting, or maybe it was the one before, the city has hired a contractor to assess about 50 miles of streams throughout the city's watersheds, and the remaining 140-ish miles of streams, we'd like to have volunteers go out and assess as much as possible and integrate those results into the watershed plans as much as we can. The city will be providing a short training to the volunteer stream assessors, and that should be getting started here in the next couple of months or so. So definitely keep an eye on your emails for that, and feel free to scan this QR code and sign up to volunteer and be kept in the loop. Next thing that I am very, very excited about, and I feel honored to get to be the one to break the news, is that our next meeting for June will be on June 25th, and this will be another in-person meeting. So we will be all meeting together in person, but this time we're going to meet at the Isaac Walton League of America's national headquarters right in Gaithersburg. And a little bit before the meeting, we'll all join a bit early and go on a bird walk around their property, which I am extremely excited about. I have a little app on my phone where you can listen to all the bird calls and identify things. So we'll send out details for that, like the meeting location and timing in the next couple of weeks, surely. But just wanted everyone to add that to your calendar, plan to meet us there. We're going to be hearing a lot about beavers and some of the other wildlife that our watersheds and riparian corridors support in the city of Gaithersburg. So very exciting. And then, yeah, here's a little post-meeting survey. We'll send all this out if you want to take a stab at all these surveys at the end or after today's call. But feel free to reach out with any questions or thoughts. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and then we can answer any additional questions if there's anything in the chat in our last couple of minutes. Or if anyone wants to come on off mute and tell us why you care about climate change, that's open floor. I know it's coming up on 8 p.m., so there's only so much energy, right? Oh, Jeanette, go ahead.
In grad school, I actually took a whole philosophy course on why should we care about climate change.
Oh,
Turns out
wow.
one of the reasons is we caused the problem, we should fix it. Most people share this ethical intuition. As
That's
Tim
a
explained, yeah, we
that's
caused
an
it.
extremely simplistic and
I
effective
know, right?
way to phrase that. Yeah,
Hard for people to disagree with.
definitely. Well, what else? Are we all excited about the wildlife meeting? Got any birds on your wish list? I joked that if we did the wildlife walk after, it would just be an owl walk. So we wouldn't really get that many good birds, probably. Cedar waxwings, they are beautiful. That's a good one. I think this is beside the point, but I think I'm going to get a tattoo of a nuthatch soon. I love nuthatches very
Oh,
much.
I mean, they're amazing. I have a bird tattoo also, so you should do it.
Okay, good deal. That was all the encouragement I needed. All
Yes.
right. Well, we are wrapped up. You guys have our email addresses. You have the surveys. We'll send out the slides. Michaela will send those out via email to you all after. And I just want to thank everybody again for your time. Thanks again to Tim and Hakuma for their great presentations and everyone here for joining tonight. So we'll be in touch again very soon. Anyone else want to add anything else? Go ahead.
Thank
Jordan,
you
I
all for
just,
coming.
oh,
Go ahead,
sorry,
Rob.
Jordan, I just wanted to ask a quick question. That background you have almost looks like Copper Lake. Could you tell us where it is?
You're on the right track. It's actually Lake Linganore in Frederick County, Maryland, which I did a big project for recently, and so I know way too much about this lake and its sister lakes now. Some weird cyanobacteria stuff going on there, but it's a very beautiful picture. So
Yes, it is.
thank you. But yeah, Clapper Lake is actually one that we're looking at a little bit outside of the watershed bound, but there's some interesting stuff going on there that relates to our watersheds in terms of how the state accounts for pollutant loads. I'll spare you. Anyway, good lake.
Next time. All right.
Next time.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Good deal. All right. Have a good night, everyone, and thanks
Thank
again
you.
for your time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.